Something different is happening with this team right now. There's tension, urgency, and behind the scenes, important decisions are already being made. Decisions that could completely change the course of the season. Injuries are piling up. Young players are suddenly getting big opportunities. And some familiar faces may already be fighting to keep their places on the roster. And the craziest part? Most fans haven't yet grasped the seriousness of some of these events. Keep reading, because what's happening now could shape everything for this franchise going forward. But first, click the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any updates. Let go! Something unexpected is happening behind the scenes in Santa Clara right now, and if you're a 49ers fan, this latest development could quietly become one of the biggest storylines of the offseason. Because while most people are focused on Brock Purdy, Brandon Ayuk, or Christian McCaffrey, the 49ers may already be preparing for major changes at multiple positions. And some players are suddenly fighting for their future with this football team. The Niners made multiple roster moves that immediately raised eyebrows across the fan base. San Francisco signed 2 running backs in the same day, Jordan Mims and Jermar Jefferson. At first glance, some fans might think these are just depth additions for camp bodies, but when you dig deeper into what's happening inside this roster, it becomes clear this move was made out of necessity. Jordan Mims is a Northern California product, a player who went from Menlo Atherton High School to Fresno State before entering the NFL as an undrafted free agent in 2023. He has already spent time with the Buffalo Bills, New Orleans Saints, and Tennessee Titans, and now he gets another opportunity with San Francisco. The interesting thing here is that the 49ers clearly value familiarity and versatility at running back, especially in Kyle Shanahan's offense, where one injury can suddenly force an unknown player into a major role. Then there's Jermar Jefferson, the former Oregon State standout, drafted by the Detroit Lions in the 7th round back in 2021. He has bounced around a bit recently with Tennessee and Arizona, but San Francisco clearly sees enough upside to bring him in during this critical phase of the offseason program. But here's where this story takes a dramatic turn. The reason the 49ers suddenly needed more running backs is because Isaac Guerendo is hurt again. And unfortunately, for both the player and the organization, this is becoming a brutal pattern. According to the report, Guerendo tore his pec while lifting weights just weeks ago. The expectation is that he could potentially return near the end of training camp, but this injury adds to a long and concerning history that stretches all the way back to college. At Wisconsin, he missed significant time with hamstring injuries. Then came the foot injuries. Once he arrived in San Francisco, the problems continued. Hamstring, groin, foot sprain, MCL, ankle, shoulder, and now the torn pec. And this is where things become uncomfortable for the 49ers, because physically, Guerendo looks like a superstar. He's 6'2", around 220 pounds, and ran a blazing 4.33 40-yard dash. The athletic profile is ridiculous. That's why San Francisco traded up to draft him. That's why the organization believed he could eventually become another explosive weapon in Shanahan's offense. But talent only matters if you can stay on the field. And now, with Jordan James continuing to impress internally, Kalen Black entering the mix, and Christian McCaffrey still leading the room, Guerendo suddenly feels like a player whose roster spot may no longer be safe. What makes this even more interesting is that there were reportedly off-season photos circulating showing Guerendo looking a little out of shape. The discussion around conditioning immediately became part of the conversation because poor conditioning can sometimes contribute to soft tissue injuries and recovery problems. Meanwhile, while all this drama is unfolding at running back, the 49ers OTA session also revealed something extremely important about the future of this defense. Osa Odigizua is already making a major impact inside the building. San Francisco desperately needed help at defensive tackle after finishing dead last in the NFL in sacks from the interior defensive line. The team only recorded 4 sacks from defensive tackles last season, which is unacceptable for a defense trying to return to championship form. That's why the 49ers aggressively traded for Odigizua, sending a third-round pick to Dallas to land one of the most underrated interior pass rushers in football. And early signs suggest this move could become one of the smartest decisions of the offseason. Reports from practice describe him as explosive, lean, and in phenomenal shape. Kyle Shanahan reportedly already views him as one of the best leaders on the roster, despite being brand new to the team. That's not something Shanahan says lightly. What's fascinating is how Odigizua complements the young defensive tackles around him. Alfred Collins brings size and power at 6'6" and over 330 pounds. C.J. West provides toughness against the run. But Odigizua brings something the entire room desperately lacked: consistent interior pressure. And according to comments mentioned during OTA coverage, Odigizua himself believes the handcuffs are being taken off his game this season. If that ends up being true, the 49ers' defensive front could look dramatically different in 2026. On the offensive side of the ball, there were also several encouraging developments that fans have been waiting to hear. Jacob Cowing finally appears healthy. Last year was essentially a lost season for him because of constant hamstring setbacks. But now, Kyle Shanahan reportedly says Cowing is in excellent shape, and during practice, he was making plays alongside another speedy young receiver, Jordan Watkins. That's important because the 49ers receiver room quietly has much more competition than people realize right now. Ricky Pearsall reportedly looked sharp once again during OTA work, building chemistry with Brock Purdy on deep routes and crossing concepts. And if Pearsall can stay healthy, the potential fit with Purdy becomes extremely exciting. Purdy thrives on timing, anticipation, touch, and accuracy over the middle of the field. Exactly the areas where Pearsall can become dangerous. But health remains the giant question hovering over this entire roster. Not just for Pearsall, not just for Guerendo, but for multiple key contributors heading into the season. And maybe the most mysterious situation of all continues to be Brandon Aiyuk. According to the report, Aiyuk was absent again, described almost jokingly as being in the witness protection program because of how little he has been seen around the team recently. At this point, fans are starting to wonder whether San Francisco is truly committed to keeping him long-term, or whether the organization is quietly preparing for a future without him. And honestly, when you combine all these developments together, you can feel the 49ers entering a transition phase that very few people are openly talking about yet. Some veterans are becoming leaders, some young players are finally emerging, and some former draft investments may already be running out of time. What do you think about Isaac Guerendo's future with the 49ers after another major injury? And do you believe Osa Odigizua could become one of the most important additions on this entire roster? There's another layer to all of this that makes the 49ers offseason feel even more intense right now. Because while the roster battles and injury recoveries are grabbing headlines, the team is also quietly preparing for one of the strangest and most demanding travel schedules in franchise history. And if San Francisco handles it correctly, it could become a huge competitive advantage later in the season. Kyle Shanahan revealed that the 49ers are expected to hold joint practices during training camp with both the Los Angeles Chargers and the Tennessee Titans. That alone is important because these practices are often more competitive than preseason games themselves. Coaches get controlled reps, starters see real action against unfamiliar opponents, and teams can evaluate depth players in high-pressure situations without risking a full game environment. But the bigger story is the logistical planning. San Francisco is already putting into place for two massive international challenges this season. After their matchup against the Cowboys, the 49ers reportedly plan to travel to Colorado Springs before heading to Mexico City. That decision tells you the organization is taking altitude preparation extremely seriously. Instead of flying from Northern California to Dallas, back to California, and then directly to Mexico City, the team wants players acclimated ahead of time to reduce fatigue and performance drop-offs. That's not random planning. That's a franchise trying to maximize every possible edge. And then comes the Australia trip. The 49ers are reportedly planning to arrive in Australia a full week before their game against the Rams. Again, this shows how seriously Shanahan and the organization are treating recovery, sleep schedules, time zone adjustment, and player conditioning. Think about how unusual this is for NFL players. A Friday morning kickoff overseas, dramatic time zone changes, international travel, altered sleep patterns, and then a quick turnaround heading into Week 2. Teams that fail to prepare for situations like this often look sluggish and completely out of rhythm. San Francisco clearly does not want that happening, and honestly, all of these little details tell you something very important about where this franchise is mentally heading into the new season. This organization knows the pressure is enormous. The 49ers are no longer the hungry underdog trying to surprise people. They are a team expected to compete for championships every single year. That changes everything. Every injury matters more. Every roster spot matters more. Every practice rep matters more. That pressure also explains why there's such strong internal focus right now on leadership and accountability. One of the most fascinating updates from OTA practices involved Nick Bosa. According to the report, Bosa has been present at the facility, rehabbing and staying around the team instead of remaining in Florida like he had during certain stretches of previous off-seasons. That may sound small to casual fans, but inside NFL locker rooms, teammates absolutely notice those things. When star players consistently show up, younger players follow their example. The report specifically highlighted how veterans like Christian McCaffrey, Fred Warner, and George Kittle have built reputations for always being around the facility, constantly setting the tone with preparation and leadership. Now it appears Bosa is taking ownership of that responsibility as well. And physically, Bosa is reportedly ahead of schedule in his ACL recovery. That's huge news for this defense, because the entire identity of the unit changes when Bosa is healthy and dominant. Offensive coordinators game plan around him. Protections shift because of him. One elite edge rusher can completely transform how aggressive a defensive coordinator can become. There was also an update on Keon White, who is reportedly progressing well after the frightening incident during Super Bowl weekend, where he was shot in the foot following an encounter involving rapper Lil Baby's entourage. According to the report, the expectation is still that White should be ready around training camp as well. But not every injury update sounded positive. Mike Williams may not be ready for the start of training camp after ACL recovery complications slowed his progress. The concern level started rising after observers noticed he still wasn't jogging fully even recently. And again, this brings us back to the larger issue hanging over this entire roster: durability. Because talent has never been the problem for San Francisco. When healthy, this is still one of the most explosive, balanced, and dangerous rosters in the NFL. Brock Purdy continues developing into one of the league's most efficient quarterbacks. Christian McCaffrey remains the engine of the offense. George Kittle still changes games. Fred Warner remains one of football's smartest defenders. And now the young talent wave is starting to arrive behind them. Jordan James reportedly flashed again during OTA work, especially in the passing game. Callan Black also received opportunities catching passes, despite not being heavily utilized that way during college. That's significant because Shanahan absolutely requires versatility from his backs. If you can't contribute in the passing game, it becomes difficult to earn major snaps in this offense. At wide receiver, the room suddenly feels deeper than many fans expected. Christian Kirk brings veteran experience. Mike Evans and DeJon Stribling add competition. Cowing and Watkins provide speed. Pearsall continues trending upward. And yet, hovering over all of this remains the unresolved Brandon Aiyuk situation. The silence around Aiyuk is becoming impossible to ignore. Fans are starting to speculate whether the organization has already emotionally moved on from him. Others believe negotiations or internal frustrations may still be lingering behind closed doors. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The 49ers are preparing contingency plans at wide receiver, whether intentionally or not. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from this entire OTA period. This roster is evolving. Some players are ascending into leadership roles. Some young prospects are finally forcing themselves into the conversation. Some veterans are fighting age and injuries, and some former core pieces suddenly feel less untouchable than they once did. But if there's one player who perfectly represents the mentality this organization wants right now, it might honestly be Christian McCaffrey. According to the report, McCaffrey has been fully engaged in team drills and continues attacking preparation with the same intensity that made him one of the best players in football. Coaches and teammates reportedly continue praising not just his production, but his obsession with preparation, conditioning, and leadership. That culture matters, especially for a team chasing a Super Bowl after years of coming painfully close. The next few months are going to determine a lot for this franchise. Training camp battles, injury recoveries, roster cuts, position competitions, the Brandon Aiyuk mystery, the development of Brock Purdy with his new weapons, the emergence of young defenders around Nick Bosa and Osa Odigizua. And right now, you can already feel the tension building inside this organization, because the 49ers know this season could define the next era of the franchise. Do you think the 49ers have done enough this offseason to return to the Super Bowl? Which player are you watching closest during training camp? And what should San Francisco do with Brandon Aiyuk moving forward? Let me know in the comments. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay locked in because the biggest 49ers news is only getting started. Let's go!